Yeah, thank you so much. Again, as always, shalom, shalom from Israel. Very happy and honored to be with you. Today we are in session 4 in our course, and today we are going to talk about, as Leah mentioned, some major factors that plays very significant role in the shaping of the Middle East in contemporary times. And as Leah mentioned before, actually in a gradual process, we will learn finally how all those things are related to what we are experiencing today in Israel and in other arenas of the Middle East. Today session deals with the Iranian Arab-Turkish power struggle. As always, I want to start by reminding us the previous sessions that we held. The first one was historical framing of the Middle East. We talked about monotheism, we talked about tribal ethnical identity, we talked about the geographical significance of the region as a major features that shape the region. In the second session, we talked about post-Turkish Ottoman Empire in the 20th century, the rise of nationalism in the Middle East, the power struggle over path, identity, and direction in the Arab world between the camp of pan-Arabism, the camp of Islamist outlook, the camp of nationalism, and the camp of the militant Islamic groups. That was, in fact, our recent sessions when we talked in our recent session about the rise of militant Islam. We talked about the ideological roots of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. We talked about Salafi jihadi ideology and how all of that was basically related to the failure of statehood in the Middle East. The same issue that we talked about right now when I was talking about the different power struggle between the ideological camp. And so we are kind of like funneling our way towards the end of the 20th century with all these big challenges and struggles in our plate already. And today we are going to talk about yet another major power struggle that shapes the region. And once again, as you probably understand by now, in the Middle East, history is present. So we are, once again tonight, we are going to be exposed to an ancient yet very much present power struggle between three major ethnical civilizations, all of whom Muslims as well, in the region. A power struggle that has been going on for centuries and actually has been gaining momentum in the end of the 20th century and in our time. And it's enormously significant to understand that power struggle. You cannot understand the story of the Middle East without actually understanding two major axes of power struggle that shapes this region to its core through the centuries. One is the power struggle within Islam. Islam is the major religion of most people in the Middle East. Islam is the third monotheistic religion. It appeared after Christianity. Christianity was born within Judaism. Islam appeared in the 7th century in the Arab Peninsula, very quickly turning into a conquering empire, spreading across large areas in the Middle East and Central Asia. Simultaneously, there has been a growing power struggle within Islam regarding the question who is entitled to lead this Muslim entity, rather known by the name of caliphate. That power struggle resulted in two major camps in Islam. Majority of Muslims are known as Sunnis. Sunni means the people that following the path of Prophet Muhammad. There are about 84% of the Muslims in the world are Sunnis. The Sunnis argue that leading the Muslim empire should be done by a person that should be elected to its position based upon its qualifications and skills. The Sunnis says leading the Muslim world is not about bloodline, it's about skills and qualifications. However, the other camp, the minority in Islam known as Shia, or the full name is Shi'at Ali, the political faction of Ali. Ali was the fourth caliph, the fourth king of the Muslim caliphate in the 7th century. He was the son-in-law and cousin of Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam. And Shiite argues that leading the Muslim world can be and should be done only by a male descendant of Ali bin Abi Talib, this fourth caliph of Islam, who was related to Prophet Muhammad, as I said. Ali was married to Muhammad's daughter Fatima, and together they had 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. Ali was assassinated. His 2 sons that claimed the leadership for themselves also were assassinated. And so that split over the question of leadership of the Muslim world between Sunnis and Shiite became one of the major axes of struggles in the region, shaping the region for centuries. There are lots of differences, theological, cultural, narratives, perspectives, political perspectives between the 2 camps. But I want you to remember particularly one significant aspect, and that is the fact that in the Shiite narratives, the minority, one of the strongest narratives is that they argue that they have been deprived of the right to lead the Muslim world with the assassination of the sons, and particularly Hussein, the younger son of Ali and Fatima, the last male grandson of Prophet Muhammad. This is an historical event that goes back to the year 680, the 7th century, when Hussein bin Ali, the last male grandson by direct bloodline to Prophet Muhammad, was butchered with his followers by his political rivals. Ever since then, the major narratives that dominates the Shiites belief is that they have been deprived by the right to lead the Muslim world, and one day they will reclaim the crown of leadership, take it back from the Sunnis who allegedly stolen that from them. Another major axis of power struggle is between 3 different ethnical civilizations in the Middle East, historical one, who also happens to be Muslims. One is the Arab civilization, represented here in front of you to the left of the lion in this nice script in green that actually reads Allah, the God in Arabic. Islam was born in Arab civilization. Today, as a fact, majority of the Muslims are not Arabs. They are not from the Arab Peninsula and they don't speak Arabic. However, Islam was born in the Arab Peninsula, Saudi Arabia of our times, and it was born in the Arab civilizations. And most of the Arabs are Sunni Muslims. There are also Shiite Muslims, Arabs, but most of the Arabs are Sunni Muslims. In the middle, you see the lion that represents ancient civilization in the region, which is Persia. The Persian civilization existed before. It was a paganic civilization. When Islam spread, the Persian civilization became Muslim, but the Persian civilization is predominantly Shia one. The Persians are not Arabs. They don't speak Arabic. They speak Farsi, and they are not from the Arab Peninsula. They are from Persia, Iran of our times. The third one is Turkey, represented in this red crescent and star. This is the Turkish civilizations. The Turks are neither Arabs nor Persians. They are not from the Arab Peninsula. They are not from Persia. They are from Central Asia. The Turks don't speak Arabic and they don't speak Farsi. They speak Turkish. Most of the Turks are Sunnis. So you got Arab, predominantly Sunni, Turkish, predominantly Sunni as well, and Persian, predominantly Shiite. And they are fighting for leadership and hegemony for centuries. I'm jumping to our times. In the late 1979, there is an Islamic revolution in Iran. Iran used to be a monarchy until there. And in 1979, there is an Islamic revolution in Iran led by the Shiite mullahs regime. Mullahs are the Shiite clergies, and they are all structured like officers in the army. There are different levels of seniority. The founder of the Islamic revolution in Iran was Ruhollah Ayatollah Khomeini. You probably heard this name. Iran becomes in 1979 an Islamic Shiite republic. And the mullah regime comes to power in Iran in 1979. The mullah regime is, to its core, it's a revolutionary, radical regime inspired by a very revolutionary, I would even say apocalyptic outlook of mankind. And the mullah regime is view this whole world in a very revolutionary outlook. And the mullah regime, basically, one of the major things that motivates the mullah regime is the deep narratives that I mentioned before, that Shiites have been deprived of the right to lead the Muslim world. Inspired by this deep narrative, the mullah regime basically has been leading in a very aggressive expansion regional policy under the title that is called Expansion the Islamic Revolution. The guiding line is that by expanding the Islamic Revolution, the mullah regime wants to position Iran in its new form as Shiite theocracy, to position Iran as the leader of the Middle East at the expense of the Sunnis, and particularly the Sunni Arabs, the traditional rivalry of the Persian civilization. And so that expansion policy of the mullah regime, this ideology, has been titled by the name of the Shiite crescent, meaning creating a crescent of influence of the mullah regime across the Middle East, particularly at the expense of the Arab Sunni states. So this is the story of the mullah regime coming in power in 1979, and one of the major tools the mullah regime is using to that end is a specific military power, which is called Al-Quds Force. Al-Quds Force is part of the main military spine of the regime, rather known by the name of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, IRG. And Al-Quds Force, Al-Quds, by the way, is the Arabic name of Jerusalem. Al-Quds Force within the Islamic Revolutionary Guards of the Iranian regime, Al-Quds Force mission is to carry out the expansion of the Islamic Revolution in the region under the title of the Shiite Crescent. When you look today, some 40 years and more after the mullah regime came to power in Iran, you see that to a large extent, the mullah regime was quite successfully expanding its influence across the Middle East. A major tool, a major platform that the mullah regime has been very effectively utilizing to that end, is by positioning itself as the spearhead of a camp that is known in the Middle East by the name of the Camp of Resistance. In Arabic, it's called Mihwar al-Muqawama. The concept of resistance is very prevalent in the Middle East, particularly since the second half of the 20th century. This is, roughly speaking, briefly to say, an ideology that has a couple of major ideological pillars or features. One, it vows non-compromising animosity to the West and the Western values. It totally rejects the West and its values. It totally rejects the presence of the West in the Middle East, and it vows to end the presence of the West in the Middle East. As part of its ideology, the Camp of Resistance also vowed to eliminate the state of Israel under the banner of liberating Palestine. Israel is portrayed by this camp as a cancer, as an outpost of the Western colonialistic, imperialistic powers that has been artificially created by the West and embedded in the region. According to the resistance, Israel is non-indigenous to the region, and therefore Israel has to be outrooted. This concept of resistance became very popular in the cultural and political and emotional public realm and political spheres in the Arab world, in the Muslim world. The mullah regime identified particularly the part of liberating Palestine as a tool that could be very useful for helping the mullah regime to entrench itself deep in the heart of the Arab states. And reminding you, the Arab states are predominantly Sunnis, they are not Shiites, and they are Arabs, not Persians. And indeed, in course of time, the mullah regime was very successfully creating this axis of resistance, basically based upon an network of armies of terror that the mullah regime either created, like its most well-known proxy, the Hezbollah in Lebanon, or using an existing factors on the ground, like Palestinians, Hamas, or Islamic Jihad, Iraqi Shiite militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen. The Houthis in Yemen you probably heard of. The Houthis in Yemen are a congregation of Shiite tribes in Yemen, about 35% of the population. The mullah regime was able in the last decade, and more than that, to create this network of these armies of terror scattered across the Middle East, based inside Arab states, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Gaza Strip. And when you look at those armies of terror that are massively armed, financed, guided, orchestrated by the Iranian regime, the Al-Quds force is the one that is orchestrating all this structure, you see something very interesting, and that is the fact that you will not find Iranians in those armies of terror. Those armies of terror are based upon local Arabs from their own homelands. So in Lebanon, an Arab state that borders Israel from the north, in the early 1980s, the Iranians are establishing what is going to become their most powerful proxy, the Hezbollah. Hezbollah are two names in Arabic, which means the party of God. The Hezbollah in Lebanon is based upon Lebanese, most of whom Shiite Lebanese. So they are Lebanese in their nationalities, they are Arabs in their ethnicities, they are Shiites in their denomination. And their loyalty is not to Lebanon, their homeland, but actually their loyalty is to Iran. The loyalty of the Hezbollah is to Iran. In Iraq, a similar process happened when the mullah regime was able to nurture a network of Iraqi Shiite militias. Again, these are Iraqis by nationalities, Arabs by ethnicity, Shiites by denomination. And like the Hezbollah in Lebanon, those Iraqi Shiite militias view the mullah regime in Iran as their higher source of authority and thus obey the Iranian mullah regime. Their loyalty is defined first and foremost by their Islamic Shiite denomination, not by the fact that they are Arabs or Iraqis. I mentioned the Houthis earlier when I was talking about it. Again, a congregation of Shiite tribes in Yemen, some 35% of the population. If you look at the map, you could see also there is a yellow figure representing two other members of this axis of resistance. These are Palestinian members of the axis of resistance, namely Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Palestine. They are colored in yellow for a specific reason. And the reason is that while all other members of the axis of resistance, the Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Iraqi Shiite militias in Iraq, they are based upon mostly Shiite Arabs, either Lebanese or Iraqis or Yemenites. Hamas and Islamic Jihad are not Shiites, they are Sunnis. So Hamas and Islamic Jihad are Arabs in their ethnicities, they are Palestinians, and they are Sunni Arabs, not Shiite Arabs. And so you may wonder what brings the Sunni Palestinian Hamas together with Iran's Shiite crescent. The answer, of course, is that they are all acting under the banner of resistance and liberating Palestine, allegedly. This map shows you the scattered of these militias and the different logos and signs of the militias that I was just referring to and talking about. At this point, I want to divert our attention to another major player in the region, which is Turkey, that we mentioned earlier. Turkey, as I said before, remember, the biggest Muslim empire ever was the Turkish Ottoman Empire. It ruled the Middle East from 1299 until 1925. more than 600 years. Remember what we said about Turkey. The Turks are not Arabs and they are not Persians. They don't speak Arabic, they don't speak Farsi. They are not from the Arab Peninsula and they are not from Persia. They are from Central Asia and they speak Turkish. Remember that I said that most of the Turks are Sunni Muslims. In the last generation and more than that, Turkey has been transformed radically due to the rise of power of one person. This is the president of Turkey, Recep Erdogan, who is coming from the circles of the Muslim Brotherhood. You may remember that we talked about the Muslim Brotherhood in earlier episodes when we talked about the power struggle over path, identity, and direction. The Muslim Brotherhood are the biggest mass movement in the Muslim Sunni world. Erdogan, coming from this Islamic background and inspired by a vision of reviving the glorious day of the Turkish Ottoman Empire, what is called the Neo-Ottomanism. Erdogan strives to position Turkey as the leading superpower in the region. Remember, again, we are looking at this ongoing, never-ending power struggle between Arabs, Persians, and Turks. And indeed, Erdogan was dramatically transforming Turkey that used to be by a constitution, a secular state, transforming Turkey into an Islamic identity. This map shows you the way Turkey has been able to spread its influence across the region, across the Middle East, including North Africa. Once again, similar to the story of the Mullah regime that was taking advantage of the weakness of Arab states because of the inner power struggle of those states, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen. Turkey was also able to take advantage of the instability and weakness of Arab states and expanding its influence across the region. You see the flags of Turkey representing its presence in the Arab world, in the Middle East and North Africa. Some of the figures you see are encompassed with the figure of a soldier. These are places where Turkey has a military presence on the ground, either directly and or through proxies. So when you look at the geostrategic picture of the region in our times, you see that two major players out of the three, namely Turkey and Iran, were able to expand significantly their presence and influence across the Middle East at the expense of the third player, and this is the Arab civilization. This regional expansion and growing influence of Iran and Turkey at the expense of the Arab world resulted in the creation of a couple of arenas of tensions across the Middle East that are represented here in the circles that you see in front of you. One arena is the eastern basin of the Mediterranean, an enormously significant place for being connecting the Europe and the Southeast, including also the fact that it has large reservoir of natural gas, which is very significant for energy. Another significant arena is the Red Sea that connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Indian Ocean. And you see, when you look down at the Red Sea, you could see at the bottom, you see this big circle pointing at a very strategic location, a very narrow passage called the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This is the bottleneck, the gap between Asia on the right-hand side and Africa on the left-hand side. The Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait is one of the most strategic locations in the world because trade is passing through that passage, which is very significant. Some 15% of world trade is going through this route, including, of course, the Suez Canal in Egypt connecting to the Mediterranean Sea. Then you see another circle that indicates another significant bottleneck. If you look beneath Iran, you see this place that is called the Hormuz Strait. This is yet another significant strategic location. Like 40% of the oil traffic is going through this narrow passage, the Hormuz Strait, between Iran on the one hand, United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia on the other hand. Yet again, another significant location on this planet. And then you see this green corridor representing what we call the Iranian land corridor. This is actually a geographical continuation, land continuation, connecting Iran through Iraq, through Syria, through Lebanon, all the way to the eastern basin of the Mediterranean. Now you can understand why the Iranian has such an interest in creating influence in those countries. Lebanon, to a large extent, became an Iranian satellite. Syria is physically partly occupied by the Iranians. In Iraq, the Iranian has a lot of influence using the Shiite affiliated proxies in Iraq. So you could see how these arenas of power struggle became so imminent today in the region because of this power struggle between Iran, Turkey, and the Arab countries. One interesting outcome of that power struggle was the consolidation of an interesting alliance of stability that brings together Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Sudan, that needs the stability, that needs to be able to actually confront and thwart the both Iranian and Turkish growing challenge. When you look at this configuration, you could also notice that there is another flag, which is not of an Arab state. It's the state of Israel, which is also part of this interesting configuration. If you go back to the maps that shows you the arenas of the power struggle, you see that in each circle you see representation of this configuration. And you could see time and again Israel's flag in all of those arenas, in the eastern basin of the Mediterranean, in the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandab Strait, in the connecting point between Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, in the land, confronting the Iranian land corridor from the south and from the west. So you see how that along those arenas of tensions, there has been configuration of this alliance of stability, trying to push back, to thwart, to stop the Iranian and Turkish aggressive expansion across the region. This leading aggression and expansion of both Iran and Turkey, and particularly Iran, led at some point to an inevitable direct collision between Iran and Israel that happens not so long ago in April this year. There has been a direct Iranian attack on Israel when the Iranians launched directly at Israel hundreds of missiles and rockets, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, attacking drones. And that attack was actually successfully intercepted by alliance that includes some of the members of the stability axis, the axis of stability, under the leadership of the United States of America. That dramatic development and the following retaliation by Israel that attacked a specific location in Iran as a signal to the Iranians, that dramatic development is basically the pinnacle of a process that actually has to do, to a large extent, with the story, of course, as I mentioned before, the Iranian expansion and the Iranian hegemonic vision in the region. And that specific event that represents, on the one hand, the operation and active operation of the Alliance of Stability to thwart, to push back that attack. That development, to a large extent, also, of course, has to do with a major development that, in its very essence, has to do with all the things that we have talked about up until now, and particularly in this session today. And the development that we are talking about is the story of the Israel-Hamas war that will be the topic of our upcoming session. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'm concluding the presentation. Once again, it's an opportunity to remind you that we are planning to be in the States for a year between September 24 to July 25, expanding hopefully our fruitful strategic cooperation with the JCC Association of North America. For additional information and finding out possibilities to bring us in person to your local JCCs, please be in contact with Leah. Thank you for your attention, and I'm opening this session to our discussion.
Thank you, Avi. In fact, Avi and I met earlier today to talk about the plans moving forward. And hopefully in the next very shortly week or so, we will send you notice about the different visits. We were able to secure significant financial support to make this very affordable for all of you. So please be on the watch and the look for more information. Avi, thank you for another fascinating session. I took a lot of notes. A lot of things now will make a lot of more sense. And I'm living here in the region and I'm part of it. So thank you for making my life a little clearer. As usual, if you have any questions, just unmute yourself, use the raise hand feature, unmute yourself, and go for it. Amanda.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for another session. The information is so great. I was doing the pre-session reading, and it was saying that Erdogan is like pro-Ottoman, pro-Caliphate, pan-Islamist, pan-Arabist. How do all of those visions work together? Like with him trying to bolster Turkey's power, does he see that as a restoration of the caliphate, where it's not so important that it's specifically Turkey, but it's like just that it's like overall Islamist power? I'm kind of missing how all those pieces fit together.
Yes, basically you read quite accurately the pieces of the picture. Erdogan is an Islamist, meaning his outlook is an Islamic. He's coming from the Sunni camp. He's close to the Muslim Brotherhood circles. He supports Hamas. Erdogan views himself personally as a frontline leader of the Muslim Sunni world, not only in the Middle East, but beyond the Middle East. And to that end, he also views a platform where Turkey is once again playing role player, meaning the same way that Turkey was the leading, biggest ever Muslim caliphate for more than 600 years, the Turkish Ottoman Empire, Erdogan views Turkey's role in something similar along this line. Not to say that Turkey will basically become the ruler of the Muslim world, but Turkey will be the frontline leader of the Muslim world, not necessarily in the context of like geographical expansion, but in the context of expansion, the influence and the leadership of Turkey across the region. So this is the way that Erdogan is incorporating the concept of caliphate, but not within geographical boundaries, the concept of neo-Ottomanism, meaning reviving the glorious day of the Turkish Ottoman Empire as the leading factor in the Muslim world, and positioning himself and the Islamic Sunni camp as the frontline leader of the Muslim world, because reminding you, most of the Muslims in the world are Sunnis.
Thank you. Eric.
Hi, Avi. Actually, two unrelated questions, because the last question made me think of something. But the original question first. I've always been fascinated that the these countries like Lebanon and Yemen and all the places where there are Iranian proxies and agents, the countries themselves, correct me if I'm wrong, don't like them, don't want them there. They're not, or to, I guess maybe to different extents, are involved in the political structure of the countries. So how are these groups, how is Hezbollah and these other groups, how are they, what's the political situation in these countries that they're able to exist against the interests and will of the country that they're in?
Yes, that's very significant. The starting point is the instability and weaknesses of those specific countries, and that instability and weakness go back to something that we talked about, and this is the fact that there are multi-ethnic, multi-religion fabric of communities in those countries. In Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, you got different ethnical groups, you got different Muslim religious denominations. In the story of Lebanon, you got another significant denomination, religious one, which are the Christians. And so constantly those countries suffered political instability, civil wars, revolutions, violence, and so on and so on. The other thing that played well to the hands of the mullahs regime, and they, as I said, they very sophisticatedly utilized it, was this whole concept of the resistance. Basically taking the banner of we are going to liberate Palestine and therefore we have to establish network of armies of terror like Hezbollah or like the Shia, because they will fight to liberate Palestine. Taking advantage of the weakness of the states, taking advantage of the attractiveness of the slogan of the resistance, the mullah regime in those specific states was able to entrench itself and to create actually Trojan horses. Now, you are right when you say that actually when you look at those states, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, there is a lot of inner resistance of the people to the takeover of Iran through the proxies. So, for example, in Lebanon, there is an ongoing and increasing outcry, pushback by majority of Lebanese, Christians, Sunnis, Druze, Shiites as well, who are actually saying to the Hezbollah, you have kidnapped Lebanon. You have turned Lebanon to an Iranian satellite. You are dragging us to a war. We don't want to be part of that war. The problem is that they don't have a say because the Hezbollah, massively armed to its teeth by the Iranians under the slogan of resistance, the Hezbollah basically terrorizes Lebanon and took it hostage. The Lebanese are saying, we are hostage. We have been kidnapped, not by Israel, not by the United States. We have been kidnapped by Iran through a local proxy called the Hezbollah. Lebanese went out to the streets in 2019, 2020, saying, we want Lebanon back. Their outcry is a little bit tragic and pathetic because Hezbollah holds the weapon and he's eliminating who's ever standing on its way. In Iraq, you got even much more complex situation because the three major ethnical groups in Iraq are Shiites. Majority of the Iraqis are Shiites, 65%, but they are Shiite Arabs, not Persians. And then you got Sunnis and you got Kurds. In the Shiite camp in Iraq, there is a camp that is aligning with Iran. But in the Shiite in Iraq, there is another camp who actually oppose the other Shiite camp, the pro-Iranian camp. Because the Shiite camp in Iraq that opposed the Shiite camp in Iraq who with Iran, the Shiite camp in Iraq that opposed the Iranian-backed Shiite says, we are Iraqis, we are Arabs. Our most significant component of identity is not the fact that we are Shiites, but the fact that we are Iraqis and Arabs. So you got an inner power struggle over there as well. And again, in Iraq, you hear people chanting Shiites, let alone the Sunnis and the Kurds. but Shiites in Iraq that says, Iran get out. Iran barra, Baghdad hurra. Iran get out, Baghdad is free. The same slogan has been echoed in Lebanon, Beirut, Iran barra, Beirut hurra. The issue is that because of the instability of these structures of those states, because of the corruption, because of the fact that you got a Trojan horses that are armed with weapons and they dictate their will, that enabled the Iranians basically to gain influence in those places. And indeed, this is a major challenge that those countries are facing. Today, right now, as we are talking, Lebanese are outers because of the situation between Israel and the Hezbollah. And the Lebanese are screaming in the face of Hezbollah and say, don't drag us to this war. This is not our war. We don't want to be engaged in a war with Israel. This is not our war. But the Lebanese knows at the same time, and they are saying to Hezbollah, you are dragging us to abyss, to destruction, at the service of the Iranian regime. The tragic is that is correct. They know that, but they're basically powerless. They're saying openly, they're urging the world, they're saying to the world, help us. We are occupied from within. That's the way the Iranian regime was able to basically take over these countries from within.
Real quick, thank you. Second unrelated question, because today's session is all about this power struggle. And when I look at the list of the most populous Muslim countries, I think you don't get to an Arab country or Turkey or Pakistan, Turkey or Iran until you're net 1, 2, 3, 4, like 6 or 7 on the list. So these more populous countries that we don't talk about, like Indonesia and Pakistan, is there also a power struggle for leadership in the Muslim world there? Do they care about trying to exert their leadership on the Muslim world, or is it really just confined to Turkey, Iran, and the Arab world?
Roughly speaking, it's confined. When you talk about the Middle East, it's confined to Iran, Turkey, and the Arab world, because the states that you mentioned, Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, and others, are not in the region. Though, by the way, Indonesia is the biggest Muslim state, but they are not from the region.
But do they care about Muslim hegemony at all?
To a large extent, the political infrastructure, the political public realm in those places, obviously very much Islamic oriented. But again, it also reflects a lot of domestic issues, domestic politics. Obviously, as you can understand, the story of, for example, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is very much present in the discussion in those Muslim countries like Indonesia and Malaysia and Pakistan, but it's in a different proportion, it's at a different scale. In the end of the day, we are looking at countries that in the end of the day are mostly pre-engaged with their own inner domestic challenges. And some of them, by the way, are, particularly Pakistan, is a significant rising player, given the fact that these are huge countries in terms of demography, capacities, population, and so on.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. We're going to move to Julie.
Thank you. I wanted to try to see if I'm understanding this correctly. So Shiites are all about bloodline, but there is, if I'm understanding correctly, no bloodline left. So you talked about this 12er branch and the imam. So that child that they say is, outside of time or waiting, he's not actually, he or she, I guess it would just be a he in the Muslim world, not actually part of the bloodline. Is that correct?
Well, he is part of the bloodline because he goes all the way back to Imam Ali, the 4th Caliph, that was the son-in-law and cousin of Prophet Muhammad. Okay. So in that sense, he is a bloodline. And indeed, you mentioned accurately, this is the major branch of Shiite, the 12-ish one, the one that speaks about the line of the 12th Imam and the last one that disappeared as a kid. And by the way, the Houthis in Yemen belongs to a different branch of the Shiites. It's the branch. It's somewhat similar, but there are some differences between them and the major branch of the Shiites. But they are all both the Houthis in Yemen and, of course, in Iran, the Shiites. They are both Shiites.
And so they all believe somehow that there is still some bloodline left somewhere. That's who is eventually lead the Muslim world.
Yes, and this is one of the major significance differences. Another thing is that in the Shia belief, the Imams are actually they are viewed as one that are connected to a divine entities. The current supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, is viewed as one who is connected to a sublime entity, a divine entity, and therefore it draws its authority from allegedly that connection. Such things doesn't exist in the Sunni theology outlook. So this is one of many differences, theological and cultural and political, between the Sunnis and the Shiites.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Avi, I have to say, you have amazing students here. They read the prep materials, they take notes, very impressive. Amanda, I think we have time for one more short question and answer.
There we go. Well, I had one short question. Hold on. There's my question page. Okay. I had one short question and one maybe slightly longer question that you might just need to tell me to Google because it might be too much. But first off, in the pre-reading, it was saying that Turkey imports most of its gas, but would like to become like a net exporter for energy in terms of like gaining more influence in the region. So if they need to import most of their gas, what do they plan to export? More oil or not oil, or like, like what? I'm confused.
Yeah. So Turkey, as a fact, imports most of its gas from Central Asia, particularly Russia. Turkey sits on a very strategic location. It's connecting between Asia and Europe, landline. But then there is another significant aspect of the Turkish strategic outlook. It's called in Turkish Mavi Vatan, which means the blue nation. Why does it call the blue nation? Because it refers to Turkey's aspiration to have dominance in water bodies, the eastern basin of the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea. In that regard, the eastern basin of the Mediterranean is enormously significant because remember what I mentioned before, there are huge amounts of gas reserves in the eastern basin of the Mediterranean. And actually right now, Turkey is looking for ways to utilize those huge reservoirs and to actually become a player that is extracting and providing this gas. And that already by itself fuels a lot of tensions between Turkey and Greece, for example. Mm-hmm. Turkey and Cyprus, Turkey and Egypt. Mm-hmm. Egypt has huge gas reservoirs. Turkey is trying to expand its influence in the eastern basin of the Mediterranean. One of the major reasons is for this whole thing of gas. And one of the things that Turkey has been doing was to sign an agreement with Libya that also borders the eastern basin of the Mediterranean, of the northern shore of North Africa, because Libya has also a huge amount of natural gas. And by signing that agreement, Turkey also hopes to create a direct access to extract gas from the eastern basin of the Mediterranean, and so to become gas provider to Europe. That's part of the Turkish strategy regarding the whole issue of energy and providing energy.
Okay, yeah, and that creates different kinds of conflicts over like sea rights and such. That makes sense.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. The other question was, it was going to be about.
I'm sorry, Amanda, we have like
I don't think we have enough
20
time.
seconds for your question and 20 seconds for Avi's answer.
I'll Google it.
No, please use your 20 seconds. All good. Okay. It's your time.
Well, maybe this is something that we can dive into next week in question session, but I was just wondering how the Turkish struggles between the Turks and the Kurds, who are both living in Turkey and living in northern Iraq and Syria, affect Turkey's relationships with those countries in terms of gaining sphere of influence over like its neighbors.
Tremendously. Just to give you on a nutshell, Turkey has today military presence in North Syria and military presence in North Iraq in the context of the Turkish-Kurdish power struggle.
More things for the future to learn.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, we have now completed 4 out of our 6 sessions. Brilliant. Every successful marriage has to have 2 amazing sides. So we have here Avi, we have here this amazing group of very committed and loyal learners. I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you, Avi, again for a brilliant session, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Shalom, shalom from Israel. Thank you.
Hello. Good evening.